Shabbat Shalom, my very dear friends. What an eventful week. We just witnessed the inauguration of Joe Biden as the new president of the United States, and it was a pretty peaceful event. Thank God for that. No chaos and revolutions, as some people would have us believe. And we wish him good luck, because I think he has a lot of work, a lot of fateful decisions will be made by his administration in the coming few days. He's already signed some pretty important executive orders, and really I think the first few days are so important because they will determine his legacy. They will determine how he will be viewed by his people, by his nation in 4 years from now, and maybe for the rest of history. We don't know. And the truth is that this is something that applies to any leader. It certainly applies to Jewish leadership. What a Jewish leader does in the very beginning determines so very much how his leadership will play out. And so, in the parasha of this week, we deal with the downfall of Paro, of course, but we deal with Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Egypt. The Jewish people go out, and that's really when the Jewish nation is born. And this is such an important concept that many commandments actually revolve around this idea of the exodus. For example, the mitzvah of tefillin has an element of the remembrance of the exodus, but also the pidyon haben, the redeeming of the firstborn. Of course, all the commandments have to do with Pesach and so on and so forth. And I want to speak here about the teaching to do with the exodus of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, which I will quote in a moment. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the Nasi, the prince, the leader of the Sanhedrin, our Supreme Court, in the years following the Churban Beit Sheni, the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. He replaced Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel, as we know, was demoted by his colleagues because they felt he did not respect some of the Chachamim in a proper way, in a way that was expected of him. It's a historical event that merits a discussion on its own, but suffice it to say that he was very young, and he goes to his wife and he says, "Tell me, what do you think? I should accept this role?" I mean, he had tremendous lineage. He was the 10th generation of leaders, going all the way to Ezra Sofer, 10 generations. Also very wealthy, and he had all the elements, but he was very young. So his wife says, "You're 18 years old. Who's going to take you seriously?" And so guess what happens? He wakes up the next morning. The Talmud tells us, and he has 18 strands of white hair. And imagine, he didn't even start. He didn't even get to his first day of leadership. He's already got white hair. And, he's about to take this role. And one of the very first things that happens there is that he's trying to convince his colleagues that you should recite the third paragraph of the Shema during the evening prayers. That's one of the first things that happens there. And the question, of course, is, what did they do until then? Well, until then, they recited the first two paragraphs, but not the third one. Why? The third one deals with tzitzit. The mitzvah of tzitzit is observed only by day. So they said there's no need to recite this third paragraph, but he felt it should be recited because you need to remember the Exodus also in the nighttime, he said. But he didn't persuade his colleagues that was the right thing. But at the end of the day, the Chachamim, the sages, agreed because Ben Zoma, who is a great sage, was able to expound it based on the verse in our parasha. So parasha says, "Leman tizkor et yom tzatcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha," that you should remember the day that you came out of Egypt every single day of your life. So Ben Zoma says, Yemei chayecha, the words Yemei chayecha, every day of your life, is a reference to the daytime hours, that you have to remember the Exodus during the daytime hour. The word kol, which seems to indicate that you have to add more. The word kol Kol Yemei Chayecha is coming to teach you, Ben Zoma says, that you have to recite the third paragraph of the Shema also during the nighttime, that you have to remember the Exodus also during the nighttime. The Chachamim, the sages, added one more layer to this. They said Yemei Chayecha is a reference to this world. Kol Yemei Chayecha is a reference to the world to come, to when Mashiach will come. Basically saying that this concept of Yetziat Mitzrayim is so central that it applies at all times, even in the future. And he finally managed, to have his opinion become very much the consensus, right? And the mainstream custom and tradition by all Jews. But the question really here is a simple question. Why is it that in the very first days of his leadership, why is it that this question mattered to him most? You would say that here comes a young leader. Just a few years after the destruction of the Second Temple, the Jewish people are bleeding. They've been exiled. They've been massacred. This is what preoccupies him at this moment. I mean, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is the Chacham, is the sage that taught us that Pikuach Nefesh Doche Shabbat. That when there's a danger of life, you have to desecrate the Shabbat. I mean, this is an important teaching. Why was that not first on the agenda? Why is this his first teaching? Also, another thing which is strange here. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Hare ani keben 70 shana. I look as if I am 70 years old. Why is the number 70 so central, so important? Why not 60? Something unique about this number 70. The late Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, who took the leadership of the Chabad movement on the 10th of Shvat 1951, which is tomorrow. The 10th of Shvat also, of course, is the anniversary of the passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson of blessed memory, Zecher Tzadik Kadosh Livracha. It's been 70 full years. So very, very, of course, not a coincidence, I guess, with this idea of 70. And so he explained like this. The Rebbe says that what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah wanted to convey to the Jewish people in those very difficult moments, he's trying to tell them, my brothers, don't lose hope. Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Egypt started when? At night, during darkness, during the obscurity. This is when our people came out of Egypt. So, in a time like this, when you're tempted to say it's all over, there'll be no more Jewish people, God forbid, in 40, 50 years from now, he says, at night is when you find the seeds. In darkness is when you find the seeds of redemption. This is where it all happens. It depends on what we do now at this very moment. And the question is, how did he know that? How did he have this intuition to come up with this message of hope? And if you actually look in the mitzvot to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim, that, for example, the commandments to do with Passover, you find that they carry a paradox. Look at the 4 cups of wine, for example. You drink 4 cups of wine. Why? Because of the 4 expressions of redemption, the Arba Leshonot Shel Geula. And what are these 4 expressions? V'otzeti, v'etzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. Right? But, so of course it has to do with something positive, something pleasant. But the 4 cups of wine, we also drink them. Why? Because Zecher Ledam, in remembrance of the blood of our brethren that was spilled during the time of the enslavement in Egypt. So in other words, we observe this mitzvah because of 2 very opposite reasons. And the truth is that we do this because we have this dual component, because the Geula, the idea of the redemption, the positivity, is something that grows out of negativity. The light grows out from darkness. Redemption grows out of exile. That is the message Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is trying to convey to us. And that is the greatness of a Jewish leader. That's the greatness of any leader. The greatness to see the future in the present. To understand the greatness of the present. The potential that the present holds that is going to determine everything that we do down the line. The word for leader in Hebrew is nasi. The word nasi, of course, could be translated as leader, as prince, but it is related to the word hitnasut, which means to elevate oneself, and that's what a leader does in very difficult moments. They're able to elevate themselves to see the forest from the trees, to see the big picture, and to see how you have the future embedded in the very moment of the present. And so, if I may add, darkness is not unrelated to light. Darkness in some way is you might say, the precursor to light. The Jewish day starts with Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker Yom Echad. We start with the night and then we go on to the day. And so, of course, the tafkid, the role of a leader is to strengthen the faith of his people, to convince them that there's no evil from above, that Hashem ultimately deals with us in kindness, that there is meaning and purpose in everything that happens in our life. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I was able to do this, you know why? Because I was 70 years old. The number 70 is about shlemut, about wholeness, about perfection. And so he says, I was able to get to this conclusion because I was given the powers from above, from Hashem, this inspiration, this gift of wisdom, to be able to lead in wisdom. And that was, of course, so important, right? For him to do the right thing at the right time. Now, the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, as I mentioned before, on Yud Shvat, took the helm of the leadership of the Chabad movement on the 10th of Shvat, and he recited a Hasidic discourse on this day. And there in this discourse, he basically, the gist of it is, it's a long discourse. He discusses the idea that our generation is the generation that will usher in the redemption and the coming of our righteous Messiah. That a lot of what we do will determine that outcome, how quick it's going to happen, but that it's imminent. And he cites so many different signs. This is, something that he said in 1951, but in 1991 and 1992, he kept on repeating that this time the world is ready for Mashiach to come. And he mentions how, world events were actually supporting that idea. That somehow the spirit of peace, where world leaders decide to let go of conflicts and so on and so forth, was actually, you had some great thinkers, Francis Fukuyama, for example, in 1992, right, who predicted that this is it, the world has come to perfection, right? Well, not quite, but one thing is for sure is that in the next 30 years, we see that there is progress that is made in that direction even more, right? I mean, you look at the standing of Eretz Israel, for example, the state of Israel and its position in the world. It's something that's unprecedented. You look at the events of the past 4 years. It's just astounding. you know, I think to me, to see an American president with an observant Jew as a son-in-law, and so influential at that, I think it tells us where the world has come. Some people might dismiss that. I see this as something very special, very unique. Celebrating Hanukkah in front of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai is something that was the stuff of dreams just a little while ago, and yet, you know, here we are. It actually happened. It actually took place. The story of the distribution of the COVID vaccine in Israel is unbelievable story. And I could go on like that. Could go on and on. So the Rebbe saw the future and the present. The Rebbe demands of us that we should also try to look for the potential of the present. How much really takes place, how much unfolds in the very present moment that we live in. And not to think, you know, what's going to be in 10 years from now and 20 years from now. Just live for today. Learn Torah, do mitzvot, live to your utmost potential, do goodness, share, give. I think if we do this, in some way, we start a chain reaction that can really impact the world at large. So, Shabbat Shalom again, and see you soon.